Sergeant Willis manned the radar sensor suite as he sat there in a nearly abandoned facility. It was currently just him in this room. The door was wide open, so he could yell for his OIC, a captain who had just got promoted 2 days prior, a field commission, and a few others down in different rooms. It gave him time to think about all that has happened to get all of humanity to this point. He remembers that he was old when the great release or awakening, salvation, beginning, or whatever you wanted to call it happened. This was a release of technology hidden from the entire species, a release that allowed humanity to jump forward in technology multiple generations in merely an instant. This was embraced by all except those that tried desperately to hold on to their idea of control and power. After the release, as everybody began to use this technology, then there came the purge. The purge happened as zealots of all kinds rampaged through, killing any that embraced this new technology, and they killed so many. Anyone that used genetic alterations, augmentations, or frequencies just to heal themselves were considered a heretic to those that worshipped money. Not all of which wore suits. Some of them wore robes and all different things. It was clear as they went into whatever sector they were trying to purge, there was a clear split between those that were military and those that were religious. This was evident. But it was far too late to put the gin back in the bottle, and the purge failed. At that moment, society began to change, and it did change dramatically. The resource wars came soon after this, as many who now found themselves living for a long time decided that they would have absolutely no consequence, as they simply bred with each other at an extremely fast rate. Not to mention those that were once old are now young again. This meant that resources were stretched very thin, which is what caused the resource wars, and it was bad. However, things did settle fairly quickly, as everyone realized very fast that they needed farmers to operate the farms. You can't just pull some idiot out of college and say, here, grow crops, raise this livestock. They don't know what they're doing. You need farmers for the farm. And without the farms, there's no food. So this became a well-respected profession, those that brought the food to the masses. Now that everybody had started to come down from the elation of the release, the new technology that brought them so much health and prosperity, and now that they had gotten kicked in the balls at least twice, once from the attempted purge and the other from almost starving to death, they all realized that being essentially immortal now, they should focus on other things. This started the golden age of exploration, especially as the first FTL engines were successfully tested just a few decades later. Humanity as a whole began to reach out, terraformed and settled across dozens of sectors in every direction. If looking on a map, it would seem as though a spider's web was stretching out into the void. This is when humanity's net first reached non-human sentient species. They first reached reptilians called the Sheets, a species that was not too happy that another spacefaring species had reached out to them, especially a species that was more advanced than the Sheets. A simple trait of tech, and the Sheet could now reach out to the stars as well. And of course, territory boundaries between humanity and the Sheet were set up, which was more than what the Sheet had expected. They expected to go to war. Humanity was not interested. The next ones to be reached was the amphibious Pro, an extremely humanoid-looking species with no hair anywhere, a long, flat tail that if dropped to the ground would actually drag, and of course, their dark eyes. This did make humanity a little nervous to see them. These black and almost lifeless eyes, like doll's eyes, that seemed to look right through you, even as they try to shake your hand. Willis found himself thinking about his tour on the Pro homeworld, and then, unconsciously, he found himself praying for his lover that he left behind to be safe. Even though there was absolutely nothing he could do about it now, this was the only thing his mind could think of. He then thought of what happened after they had dealt with the Pro, as humanity had also found an insectoid race called the Wrath. This is what the translator called it, and the name stuck. Despite what everybody thought an insectoid species would be, they were surprisingly kind, especially after humanity helped them deal with a famine that reached across not one but 2 sectors. Willis thought to himself and chuckled as he remembered 2 of his former friends that had some liberty on the Wrath homeworld. He then chuckled again to himself, as the numbers of males to females is only 1 male to every 7 female, and it is to no surprise that neither of his buddies actually wanted to leave the planet at all. Of course, neither did the ones they left behind, as they were simply dragging on his buddy's arms. He still remembers the vidlink that he got, seeing the images of those females being held back by their families, as they seemed to be addicted to humans' genetic augmentations. Later on, humanity found another species, the avian tinks, which also turned out to be very human-looking. Yet they had barely begun reaching beyond their own world when humanity found them. Yet that is not exactly true, as it turns out that the tink found the humans. As it turns out, tink's sensors were far superior to even modern human sensors, so much so that humanity has difficulty even copying it. Willis stopped for a while as he realized he was rubbing the side of the tink sensor array that he was in front of, grateful for it, as it allowed humanity to see deeper into the darkness of the void with much better vision. The tinks exchanged the tech willingly the moment they tasted a simple foodstuff from humans called cornbread. They traded it quickly, along of course with seeds to plant, equipment to grow the ingredients and harvest, and of course the recipe. Humanity's ability to search the stars seemed to double overnight. Willis then gets solemn again, thinking about his time when he also did a tour on the Tink planet. While there, he took in a pair of hatchlings that had unfortunately lost their parents in an accident. He helped raise them for 7 years, as that's how long his tour was. Both the boy and the girl were in absolute tears when he left, but they did understand that he would return, as he said that he promised he would, and this was the only reason either of them even let go for a moment and allowed the extended family to take care of them. Willis then felt a tear start to form in his eye, not from the loss of his chicks, as he knew that they were both most likely safe, but for the fact that he would not be able to keep his promise to the young, something he swore he would never, ever do. It would be another decade to a decade and a half before the species that the humans call crabs were found. The humans called them crabs. For one, they couldn't pronounce the name. It wasn't possible because these crustaceans do not have a tongue, and they do have multiple mouths. These crustaceans are not fully crustaceans, as they have a reptilian-looking body parts, and they're also amphibious. When humanity greeted them, the crabs played nice. They simply went along and went by the rules, sitting in the meetings with all the other species, minding their manners as best they can, which surprised everybody, as the crabs held just as much space as humanity, perhaps even more. Willis thought to himself, as the official numbers have always changed. It wasn't long ago when the crabs were aiding in the searches for other sentient species, they found the schley. At a glance, one could confuse the schley for bipedal otters. A mostly peaceful peoples, and they had not even reached their closest moon, yet they did have telecommunications and enough sensors to actually see the ships in space, which surprised everybody when the Schlei actually contacted up, and of course humanity answered. However, most looked at the Schlei, well, a little awkward, and one of the commanding officers actually said, "Hell, they hadn't even reached beyond their own exosphere yet. What are we doing here?" As humanity helped the Schlei reach across into their own sector, allowing them to simply terraform other planets in their sector so that they could spread out, the crabs had a different idea. To the crabs, the Schlei looked like nothing more than talking food. Talks began immediately, and the Schlei were given membership into the Galactic Council. This was rushed through by humanity to make sure they were safe, and this meant the crabs couldn't just harvest the Schlei. The crabs, at that point, began to get aggressive as they believed this was a huge overreach of power. They knew they couldn't take on all the other species at the same time, as this Galactic Council would simply pull all the resources together and simply overrun them. So they planned carefully. The crabs struck at humanity several targets at the same moment. They sent messages to the other species, and the message was simple: to stay out of the fight, and they will not be engaged at all. In fact, they even sweetened the deal and said other species will get premium trade rates from this moment forward, and this was enough for many of the greedy ones to simply back off and let humanity face off against the crab. That is what led humanity to this point. The crabs were smart. Their blitzkrieg was very well orchestrated. Using their size, only about 4 feet tall by human standards, they were able to use pods that were usually designed for full-grown humans with exosuits on, which meant they could use them more efficiently than humans. They would jump in as close as possible, and they would simply send the pods crashing into ships, stations, and even colonies, and just overrun with numbers as they swarmed the area, able to grip onto the walls, the ceilings, even as though there was artificial gravity or not. They could simply move wherever they chose to. The humans, of course, all fought back with insane vigor, but thanks to the crab taking out key points, their resources began to run low very, very quickly. So much so that for the humans, when they ran out of ships due to meltdowns or destructions or kamikaze attacks, they fought back with even greater strength than before and more ferocity. It seems as though the humans would throw themselves without fear or any hesitation at the very face of death itself to take down the enemy that was coming at them. Many battles were fought to a sheer stalemate, even though the crabs clearly outnumbered them. After each battle, the crabs kept telling humanity to surrender, not asking them, but demanding them, telling they had to surrender. Humanity refused, and the fight continued. A fight that lasted 20 years, and even though humanity never ran out of courage, in the end, they ran out of time. Time to build ships, as the shipyards were torn apart in the first blitzkrieg. In the time it took to build a ship now, the crab could birth legions. Legions that would simply crash into the ship and take it apart and still have more to fall onto the planet below. They simply had quantity on their side, not quality. While thinking this, the facility shook as bombardment on Earth started. Humanity's fleet, once the greatest power in the universe, is now scattered in pieces, with 5 times or more as many crab ships also destroyed, scattered across the void. It turned out the crabs were just as stubborn as humans. Through all known channels, the data was collected. The crabs had bled their forces dry to take down humanity. Human sapper ships had even destroyed the crab shipyards, usually to the cost of their own lives. However, this was enough. The paltry 3 dozen crab warships that were left in this fight was all they had left. Though the warships are currently held together with little bits of wire and bad intentions, they can still strike from orbit, and humanity has nothing left to send at the enemy. They have drained their resources dry. Even if the crabs do send the ships to the surface, the chances of them taking off again are nil, which means the crabs have no choice but to pummel the planet until they take out everything on the entire surface. Everything plus a half a kilometer deep as they keep slamming down into the surface. This is why what was left of humanity has dug itself deep, very, very deep into the mantle of the planet, trying to hide from this. Perhaps they would have to hide there for a millennia, but they would survive. They did try to evacuate once. The crab ships came in, guns blazing, and the ships knew they couldn't get away, so the human captains simply told everybody in the back to pray and kamikaze their own ships into the largest warships the crabs had left. Those ships ended up getting caught in Earth's gravity well, and saying they were unrecoverable is being nice. The room shook again around Willis, as the granite around the facility began to buckle under the constant pressure. At this point, despite everything shaking, everything buckling, everything waiting to collapse on him, all Willis can do is his watch his sensor away, and wait. While he waited, visions of his lover and his children danced through his head. He remembers his friends whose bodies are now lost to the void after the loss, or to be more specific, the stalemate on Supplement 5. Another shake, this one more violently, as unsecured files fall from their shelf and land on the ground. As Willis stumbles just a little bit, the sensor readout flickers. Willis's thoughts rummage back into himself for a moment as he thinks, it's strange. What was it, 500 plus years ago? I was just a retired grunt. Now, here I am on a radio, awaiting for an enemy to artillery strike us to death. It's too bad we couldn't count on the others. It really sucks. I mean, you'd think we could count on them. I thought we were friends. Another strike shakes Willis so hard that he almost falls completely out of his seat. Reorientating himself, he looks at the readout and he thinks, wait, something's off. On the readout, ships are jumping in. But that doesn't make sense. There shouldn't be any left. There's a few more coming in. Are these reinforcements? Then there's a dozen. Then 2, 3 dozen are coming in. They just keep coming. Willis thinks to himself, what the hell is going on? He reaches up and pushes the headphones very tight so he can make sure that there's no outside interference. He listens close to the translated message. Sir. What? Sir, get in here. What? Reinforcements have arrived. What you talking about, Willis? No, sir, listen. He hands over another set of headphones, and the sir puts them on. The message repeats for the humans to respond. Unknown vessels, this is Mount Hayes. We read you. State your intentions, over. A voice comes through, translated. We've come to aid our friends. Aid you by chewing on crabs. Both Willis and his OIC look at each other, confused a little bit. They understand the meaning, but the translation is a little messed up. Willis then gets a small grin on his face before responding, don't forget the butter. Willis then pulls everything up on the main holodisplay, and he and the OIC spin around and look to it, and they watch as friendly ships suddenly begin to engage the crab remnants, species that know almost nothing of space combat, with retrofitted cargo ships charge the line. The few warbirds that they actually had from species that did know space combat begin to tear into the half-broken crab ships. Missiles begin to streak across space, reaching for their target, bobbing and weaving around all sorts of debris so they can find their target. As they did, Cannons fired and streaked their death across space. As the crab fleet began to break apart from the impacts, they began to fall towards Earth. The OIC, watching this, had a giant grin on his face and said, "Well, it's good to have friends, isn't it?" Willis replied, "It sure is. And there's nothing like having a bunch of your friends show up with lots of guns, sir." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me today on this short story. Before I go, I need to send out some special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those would be MTF Guard, Guardian Sage, SS Demon, Erica Gem, Prozac and Pancakes, and Brian Kemp. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.